How could two people fall for each other when their entire world was set on keeping them apart? What kind of courage does it take to stare down kings, queens, popes, and the very structure of society, all for the sake of a forbidden embrace? Medieval Europe, spanning the 6th to 15th centuries, was a brutal, unforgiving time where love was often a political tool, not a heartfelt choice. Yet against all odds, these couples found a way to defy the rules and carve out their own epic love stories. Number 8. Countess Sibila of Acerra and King Tankred of Lecce. In the sun-drenched, politically turbulent kingdom of Sicily, during the late 12th century, a love story unfolded that was less about courtly romance and more about fierce loyalty and an unwavering fight for a throne. This was the world of Countess Sibylla of Acerra and her husband Tankred, a man of unconventional origins who would become king. Their tale is one of relentless struggle against overwhelming odds, defying the powerful Holy Roman Empire itself, all while a deeply personal bond held them together through unthinkable pressure. Sibila was a noblewoman of considerable standing, sister to Count Roger of Acerra, a powerful lord in southern Italy. She was strong-willed, intelligent, and known for her political acumen. Tankred, on the other hand, was born into a complicated legacy. He was an illegitimate grandson of King Roger II of Sicily, a Norman monarch who had forged the vibrant Mughal kingdom. Despite his royal blood, his illegitimacy meant he was not the obvious heir, especially with the legitimate heir, King William II, still on the throne. Their marriage, likely arranged for political stability and alliance, brought together two ambitious individuals. They shared a vision for the future of Sicily and a deep-seated pride in their Norman heritage. When King William II died without an heir, in 1189, the succession crisis plunged the kingdom into chaos. The rightful heiress, Constance, William II's aunt, was married to Henry VI, the formidable son of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa. This meant that if Constance ascended the throne, Sicily, a wealthy and strategically vital kingdom, would fall under the control of the Holy Roman Empire. The barons of Sicily, fearful of German domination, looked for an alternative. They saw in Tankred a native-born champion, a man who, despite his birth, possessed the charisma and military prowess to defend their independence. Against all prevailing norms of legitimate succession and defying the clear claims of Henry VI, they elected Tankred as their king. In 1190, Tankred and Sibila now stood at the helm of a kingdom marked for conquest. Sibila became queen, a partner in power, not just a consort. She was a woman of formidable spirit, often advising Tankred and playing a direct role in the political and military strategies that defined their reign. Contemporary chroniclers describe her as a strong woman fully engaged in the affairs of state, a vital support to her husband who was constantly battling internal dissent and external threats. Their shared objective was the survival of their kingdom and the preservation of their family's claim. Their defiance was immediately met with the wrath of Henry VI. The emperor saw Tankred as a usurper, and Sicily as his rightful inheritance. Through his wife, Constance, a brutal war ensued. Tankred, though a capable military leader, faced an uphill battle. He fought valiantly, defending his borders, raising armies, and attempting to solidify his rule. Sibila was not merely a passive observer. She was a political force in her own right, rallying support and managing the court in her husband's frequent absences on campaign. Their love was forged in the crucible of war and political intrigue. It was a partnership based on mutual respect, shared ambition, and an unwavering commitment to their cause. They had two sons, Roger and William, who represented their hopes for a lasting dynasty, a legacy born of defiance. Tragedy, however, stalked their reign. In 1193, their eldest son Roger, whom Tankred had crowned co-king, died suddenly. This was a devastating blow, weakening their hold on the throne and crushing their personal hopes. A year later, in 1194, King Tankred himself succumbed to illness, leaving Sibila a widow and their youngest son, William III, a mere child. As king, Sibila, now Queen Regent, faced the ultimate test of her strength and devotion to her family's legacy. She was a mother fighting for her children's inheritance, a queen fighting for her kingdom's independence. She continued the defiance, attempting to secure William's position against the encroaching might of Henry VI. She sought alliances, managed the treasury, and tried to maintain order amidst growing chaos, but the odds were too great. Henry VI launched a full-scale invasion. Overwhelming Sicily's defenses, Sibila, with her young son and daughters, was captured. Henry VI's vengeance was swift and brutal. He abolished the Norman kingdom, imprisoned the royal family, and even exhumed Tancred's body to symbolically strip him of his royal honors. Sibila and her children were dragged to Germany, held captive in various imperial prisons. It was a bitter end to their defiant reign. Yet, even in captivity, Sibila maintained her spirit, fighting for the release and survival of her children. Her daughters eventually found refuge in convents, and her son William likely died in captivity. The story of Sibylla and Tancred is a stark reminder that love in the Middle Ages could be a fierce protective bond, not always expressed through ballads and serenades, but through shared struggle and unwavering loyalty. They defied the powerful claims of empire, the conventions of succession, and the sheer might of their enemies, all for the dream of a sovereign kingdom and a future for their family. Their love was a fortress in a storm, a testament to enduring partnership in the face of medieval tyranny. Number 7. King Edward II and Piers Gaveston. In the often grim landscape of 14th century England, amidst the rigid hierarchies and political machinations, unfolded a relationship so intense, so all-consuming, that it shattered social norms and ultimately led to devastating consequences for both men. This was the extraordinary bond between King Edward II and Piers Gaveston, a bond that defied not only the expectations of kingship, but the very notions of acceptable companionship in medieval society. Edward II, who ascended the throne in 1307, was a king unlike many of his warrior predecessors. He preferred the company of close friends, artistic pursuits, and sports rather than the grim business of war and governance. Into this world stepped Piers Gaveston, a Gascon knight, witty, charming, and skilled in arms. Gaveston was the son of a Gascon knight in the service of Edward I, Edward II's formidable father. He was introduced to the future king as a youth, and a powerful, almost immediate connection formed between them. This wasn't just a friendship, it was an infatuation that bordered on obsession, a love that transcended the expected boundaries of medieval royal relationships. Contemporary chroniclers, often scandalized, describe Edward's inordinate affection for Gaveston, a bond so deep that Edward called him brother, including his new wife, Isabella of France. Their defiance began early. Edward I, a stern and traditional king, recognized the unsettling nature of his son's attachment to Gaveston. He banished Gaveston multiple times, perceiving him as a corrupting influence and a threat to royal authority. Yet each time, upon Edward I's death, the younger Edward immediately recalled Gaveston, showering him with honors, titles, and wealth, unprecedented for a mere knight. Edward II made Gaveston Earl of Cornwall, a title traditionally reserved for members of the royal family, and even married him to his own niece, Margaret de Clare. The defiance wasn't just in the king's favoritism. It was in the sheer disregard for political prudence and the absolute elevation of personal affection over the duties of kingship. Edward lavished gifts on Gaveston, consulted him on matters of state, and seemed genuinely miserable without his presence. This created a huge amount of resentment, among the English nobility. The powerful barons who saw Gaveston as an upstart commoner, a dangerous foreign influence, and an obstacle to their own power. The barons, known as the Ordinances, repeatedly demanded Gaveston's exile. Their anger wasn't solely about Gaveston's status. It was also about his arrogance and cutting remarks towards them. He gave them mocking nicknames, slighted their dignity, and openly flaunted his influence over the king. Edward, however, was stubbornly devoted. He would consent to Gaveston's banishment only to find ingenious ways to recall him or visit him covertly. He sent Gaveston to Ireland as Lord Lieutenant. A powerful position made his absence more bearable, and then swiftly brought him back. Their love, or at least Edward's profound attachment, became a central point of contention between the king and his magnates. It destabilized the kingdom. Edward was willing to risk civil war, defy Parliament, and alienate his powerful father-in-law, the King of France, all for the sake of Gaveston's company. This was a radical break from the political marriages and alliances that defined medieval royal life. While kings were expected to have favorites, the intensity and exclusivity of Edward's devotion to Gaveston, to the exclusion of his royal duties, and his queen, was scandalous and unprecedented. Queen Isabella, a young and proud woman, was understandably hurt and humiliated by Edward's clear preference for Gaveston. Their marriage suffered immensely, laying the groundwork for future tragedies. Court was rife with tension, whispers, and conspiracies. The ultimate defiance came in 1312. Despite multiple oaths and agreements, Edward again recalled Gaveston. The enraged barons, led by Thomas, Earl of Lancaster, rose in rebellion. Gaveston was captured. Edward, distraught, tried desperately to save him, but the barons were ruthless. Without a formal trial and defying the king's authority, Piers Gaveston was executed. His death shattered Edward II. King was devastated, his grief profound and openly expressed. His fury at the barons who had taken Gaveston's life would fester for years, fueling his desire for revenge and further destabilizing his reign. The chroniclers describe Edward's despair, a testament to the depth of his feeling for Gaveston. The love between Edward II and Piers Gaveston defied every convention of their age. Royal duty, aristocratic privilege, and even the accepted forms of affection. It was a bond that, while it brought great joy to the king, brought immense political strife, and ultimately led to Gaveston's brutal death and Edward's eventual deposition and gruesome end. Their story stands as a poignant and tragic example of how intensely personal relationships could collide with the rigid structures of medieval power, ultimately proving that love, even in its most defiant form, could not always conquer all in an age of iron and ambition. Number 6. Katherine of Valois and Owen Tuda. Imagine being a queen, the widow of a powerful king, and then choosing to marry a man who is not royalty, not even a high-ranking noble, but a mere Welsh squire. In the 15th century, such a choice wasn't just unconventional. It was an act of profound defiance against the very foundations of royal lineage, political alliance, and social hierarchy. This is the incredible clandestine love story of Katherine of Valois, Queen Dowager of England, and Owen Tudor, a story that dared to intertwine royal blood with humble origins, forever changing the course of English history. Katherine of Valois was born a French princess, daughter of King Charles VI of France. Her destiny was sealed by political necessity. In 1420, she married the formidable King Henry V of England, a union formalized by the Treaty of Troyes, which aimed to unite the crowns of England and France under their son. She became Queen of England, a symbol of Anglo-French ambition. However, her life as queen was tragically short. Henry V, the great warrior king, died suddenly in 1422, leaving Katherine a widow at just 20 years old with an infant son, the future Henry VI. As Queen Dowager, Katherine occupied a precarious but significant position. She was the mother of the reigning king, but her youth and potential for remarriage posed a threat to the stability of the crown. Royal widows, especially those with young sons, were often kept under close watch to prevent them from remarrying someone who might gain influence over the young king or create an alternative line of succession. There were even laws against such marriages without the council's permission. It was in this constrained world that Katherine met Owen Tudor. Owen was a relatively obscure Welsh squire, a good-looking athletic man who likely came to court in the retinue of one of the Welsh nobles serving the royal household. He was a distant cousin of the powerful Welsh gentry family, the Tudors of Penmynydd. The exact circumstances of their meeting are shrouded in mystery, but a popular legend suggests Owen, known for his athleticism, slipped and fell into the Queen's lap during a dance, or perhaps charmed her with his good looks and strong physique. Whatever the initial spark, their connection deepened into a passionate, undeniable love. This was a radical departure from the norm. Queens did not marry squires. The idea was scandalous, an affront to the carefully constructed system of royal bloodlines. Their relationship had to be kept secret, hidden from the powerful noble council that governed England during young Henry VI's minority. Their defiance wasn't a single dramatic act, but a sustained, courageous commitment to their love. They married secretly, likely between 1429 and 1431, without the required permission from the King's Council or Parliament. This clandestine union was a direct challenge to the authority that sought to control the Queen's every move. The exact date and location of their marriage are unknown, a testament to how carefully they guarded their secret. Over the next few years, their love bore fruit. Katherine and Owen had several children together: Edmund, Jasper, and Owen, and possibly a daughter, Margaret. These children, born to a queen and a commoner, were illegitimate in the eyes of the law, but they were still half-siblings to the reigning king, Henry VI. The existence of these children made their secret even more dangerous. Concealment of their marriage and children was an extraordinary feat, a testament to their mutual devotion and the loyalty of their household. They lived under immense pressure, knowing that exposure could lead to severe repercussions, not just for them but for their children. Eventually, their secret began to unravel. Perhaps whispers grew too loud, or the existence of their children became impossible to hide. In 1436, the secret was out. The King's Council reacted with outrage. Owen Tudor was arrested and imprisoned, accused of having presumed to marry the Queen Dowager without permission. Katherine herself was sent to Bermondsey Abbey, less a punishment and more a means of controlling her and separating her from Owen. Even separated and facing the wrath of the powerful council, their defiance held. Katherine, despite her own declining health, defended her marriage and her children. Owen, though imprisoned, continued to assert his marital rights. While their relationship was met with disapproval and legal action, their children, particularly Edmund and Jasper, were eventually acknowledged by their half-brother, King Henry VI. This was a remarkable concession, a sign that the king, perhaps out of affection for his mother, chose leniency over harsh condemnation. Katherine died in 1437, likely from complications related to childbirth or her fragile health. Owen Tudor, though imprisoned and facing continued suspicion, eventually managed to escape and re-establish himself, even serving his stepson, King Henry VI. He lived to see his eldest son, Edmund Tudor, elevated to the earldom of Richmond, a crucial step in the family's rise. The defiance of Catherine of Valois and Owen Tudor echoes through history, not just as a romantic tale but as the improbable origin story of the Tudor dynasty. Their illegitimate children, particularly Edmund, would father the future King Henry VII, who, by defeating Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, would bring an end to the Wars of the Roses and usher in one of England's most famous royal houses. Their secret marriage, born of love and defying all royal protocol, was a bold gamble that ultimately paid off, reshaping the very fabric of English monarchy and standing as a powerful testament to love's surprising ability to forge new destinies. Number 5. King Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville. In the midst of England's bloody 15th century Wars of the Roses, a conflict defined by rival claims to the throne, political marriages, and shifting loyalties, a king dared to choose love over dynastic ambition. This was the daring clandestine romance between King Edward IV, the dashing young Yorkist monarch, and Elizabeth Woodville, a beautiful widow with Lancastrian connections. Their secret marriage was an act of profound defiance against the very expectations of kingship, shaking the political landscape and igniting a firestorm of controversy that would have lasting repercussions. Edward IV, a tall, modic, and militarily brilliant king, had seized the throne from the Lancastrian King Henry VI in 1461. As a new monarch, his most pressing duty was to secure his dynasty. This meant a politically advantageous marriage to a European princess, one who would bring a strong alliance and a rich dowry. His most trusted advisor, the powerful Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, the kingmaker, was actively negotiating such a match with the French royal family. But Edward had other plans born of a personal connection that defied all such calculations. Elizabeth Woodville was the daughter of Richard Woodville, a relatively minor nobleman, and Jacquetta of Luxembourg, a woman of much higher birth and widow of the Duke of Bedford. Elizabeth was also a widow herself. Her first husband, Sir John Grey of Groby, having died fighting for the Lancastrian cause, leaving her with 2 young sons. She was older than Edward, lacked a royal dowry, and her family, though rising, was not of the highest noble rank. Her Lancastrian connections were a distinct disadvantage. Their meeting is shrouded in romantic legend, often depicting Elizabeth directly petitioning the king for the return of her deceased husband's lands. Whatever the exact circumstances, Edward was captivated by her beauty, her intelligence, and her quiet strength. He was a king accustomed to getting his way, and he had fallen deeply in love. Their defiance took the form of an incredibly risky secret. On May 1st, 1464, with only a few witnesses present, Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville were married in a private ceremony at Grafton Regis, the Woodville family home. This marriage was performed without the knowledge or consent of the king's council, his powerful nobles, or his chief advisor, Warwick, who was still in France, negotiating a French alliance on Edward's behalf. The implications of this secret marriage were immense. Defied centuries of royal tradition, where marriages were political instruments, not matters of personal preference. It directly undermined Warwick's authority and left him humiliated on the international stage. It elevated a relatively obscure family with Lancastrian ties, a move that was deeply resented by the old aristocracy, who saw the Woodvilles as upstarts greedy for power and influence. For months, the marriage remained a secret. Edward continued to let Warwick believe he was pursuing the French alliance, while he was already a married man. When Edward finally revealed the truth in September 1464, the reaction was explosive. Warwick was furious. His carefully constructed diplomatic efforts ruined. The English nobility was outraged. Feeling insulted by the king's deception and threatened by the sudden rise of the Woodville family, the marriage of Edward and Elizabeth was the ultimate act of defiance against a political machine that sought to control the king. It showed Edward's fierce independence and his willingness to risk enormous political instability for the woman he loved. Elizabeth, in turn, demonstrated remarkable courage by accepting the king's hand. Knowing the storm it would unleash, she faced immediate hostility and suspicion from the established nobility, who saw her as an unsuitable match, a manipulative woman, and a threat to their own power. Their love story, however, was also a deep partnership. Despite the political turmoil she caused, Elizabeth proved to be a loyal and devoted wife. She gave Edward numerous children, including 2 sons, the princes in the Tower, and 5 daughters, securing his dynasty. She supported him through rebellions and challenges, often being by his side or managing the court in his absence. Yet the consequences of their defiant union were far-reaching. The resentment against the Woodvilles grew, fueling open conflict between Edward and Warwick. Warwick, feeling betrayed and marginalized, eventually turned against Edward, briefly deposing him and installing Henry VI back on the throne. Though Edward eventually regained his crown, the marriage continued to be a source of instability, even after Edward's death. In 1483, the controversy surrounding the legitimacy of their marriage was resurrected by Richard III, who claimed it was invalid, ostensibly because it veered by Richard. This claim led to the infamous Princes in the Tower mystery and Richard III's usurpation of the throne. Edward IV and Elizabeth Woodville defied the powerful currents of their age, choosing personal love over political expediency. Their secret marriage was a dramatic, passionate act that redefined the role of a king in choosing his queen. It was a romance born of genuine affection that unleashed a cascade of events, demonstrating that even in a brutal age of power politics, the human heart could stubbornly refuse to be dictated by convenience, forever altering the course of a kingdom. Number 4. Theodora and Justinian I. Step back into the 6th century to the glittering, complex world of the Byzantine Empire, where the emperor was seen as God's representative on earth and social hierarchies were as rigid as the mosaics adorning the imperial palace. In this world, a woman from the very bottom of society, an actress and courtesan, dared to captivate the heart of an emperor, defy every social convention, and rise to become one of the most powerful and influential empresses. This is the astonishing story of Theodora and Justinian I, a partnership built on love, ambition, and an unwavering commitment to challenge the status quo. Theodora's early life was a world away from the imperial palace. She was the daughter of a bearkeeper for the Hippodrome, Constantinople's grand circus arena. She entered the entertainment world as an actress, a profession that in Roman and Byzantine society often carried a reputation for immorality and was associated with prostitution. She was known for her beauty, wit, and intelligence, but her background marked her as someone utterly unsuitable to be an empress. For an emperor to marry such a woman was unthinkable, a scandal of epic proportions. Justinian, on the other hand, was born into an aristocratic family in the Balkans, destined for a career in the imperial administration. He was intelligent, ambitious, and deeply pious. Eventually becoming emperor in 527 AD, he was also a man of remarkable conviction and vision. Their paths crossed in Constantinople. Justinian, then a rising statesman, was captivated by Theodora. He saw beyond her reputation, recognizing her sharp mind, strong character, and remarkable charisma. Their connection was immediate and profound. He fell deeply in love, a love that defied all rational and societal expectations. The greatest hurdle to their union was not just public opinion, but the law itself. Roman law prohibited senators and high-ranking officials from marrying women of the acting profession. For Justinian, this was a direct impediment to marrying the woman he loved. But Justinian was not easily deterred. His determination to marry Theodora was an act of profound defiance against the very legal and social structures of his empire. He first had to persuade his uncle, Emperor Justin I, to change the law. Justin I, perhaps swayed by his nephew's fierce devotion or recognizing Theodora's intelligence, relented. A new law was passed allowing such marriages. This was a direct legislative challenge to centuries of social norms, a legal pathway carved out specifically for Justinian's love. In 525 AD, Theodora and Justinian were married. 2 years later, upon Justin I's death, they ascended to the throne as emperor and empress. This was an unprecedented rise for Theodora. She wasn't merely a consort. She was a true partner in power, demonstrating an authority and influence rarely seen in Byzantine empresses. She defied the unspoken rule that an empress should come from noble or royal lineage. Their reign, which lasted for nearly 40 years, was a testament to their powerful partnership. Theodora was not relegated to the women's quarters. She participated actively in state affairs, advised Justinian, and even had her own court and official responsibilities. She was known for her shrewd political judgment, her piety, and her compassion for the poor and marginalized, even founding institutions for former courtesans. Their greatest act of combined defiance perhaps occurred during the Nika riots of 532 AD. This was a massive uprising in Constantinople. Fueled by political factions and popular discontent which threatened to overthrow Justinian, the imperial palace was besieged, and Justinian, along with his advisors, was on the verge of fleeing the city. It was Theodora who, in a famous and defiant speech, rallied her husband and his court. She declared, "Royalty is a good burial shroud, preferring to die as an empress than to live in exile." Her courage and unwavering resolve inspired Justinian to stay and fight. Her defiance saved the empire. The loyal generals, bolstered by Theodora's resolve, launched a counterattack that brutally suppressed the riots, solidifying Justinian's rule. This event demonstrated that their partnership was not just one of love, but of shared vision and immense strength. Under pressure, Theodora continued to exert significant influence throughout her life. She issued her own decrees, met with foreign ambassadors, and held considerable sway over judicial appointments and religious policy. Her portrait appears alongside Justinian's in the magnificent mosaics of the Church of San Vitale in Ravenna, a visual testament to their shared sovereignty and her unique status as empress. Her defiant rise from humble origins to co-ruler of an empire was a radical challenge to the rigid social structures of the time. Theodora and Justinian's story is a powerful narrative of love transcending class, a king's devotion overriding centuries of tradition, and a woman's fierce intelligence carving out her own unparalleled destiny. They proved that true partnership could defy even the most entrenched norms and reshape the very definition of imperial power. Number 3. Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II. In the fiercely competitive and often brutal world of 12th century Europe, where marriages were strictly political and lands were claimed through alliances rather than affection, the union of Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II of England. But what began as a calculated power play quickly escalated into a tempestuous, complicated, and ultimately defiant relationship that challenged the very notions of medieval kingship, queenly power, and meritocracy. Their love, or at least their passionate connection, was often overshadowed by ambition, betrayal, and a lifelong struggle for dominance. Eleanor was no ordinary woman. She was the Duchess of Aquitaine, in her own right, one of the wealthiest and most powerful women in Europe, controlling vast territories in southwestern France. She was also previously Queen of France, having been married to Louis VII for 15 years before their controversial annulment. She was intelligent, cultured, politically shrewd, and famously beautiful. Henry Plantagenet, Duke of Normandy and Count of Anjou, was 11 years her junior, a vigorous, ambitious, and highly intelligent young man destined for greatness. He was already a formidable presence, with boundless energy and a keen legal mind. Their marriage in 1152, just 2 months after Eleanor's annulment from Louis VII, was an audacious act of defiance against the King of France, and a political masterstroke. Eleanor brought Henry the vast Duchy of Aquitaine, transforming him from a powerful French vassal into a ruler with more lands than the French king himself. When Henry became King of England in 1154, their combined territories formed the sprawling Angevin Empire, stretching from Scotland to the Pyrenees. This was a partnership of immense power and shared ambition. Initially, a marriage forged in the fires of political opportunity. For the first decade or so, the relationship, despite its power dynamics, seemed to flourish. They were both intelligent, energetic, and shared a passion for governance and expanding their empire. They had 8 children, 5 sons and 3 daughters, ensuring a robust line of succession. Eleanor played an active role in government, even acting as regent during Henry's absences. She brought the sophisticated courtly culture of Aquitaine to England, transforming the English court. However, their strong personalities, immense ambition, and Henry's notorious philandering eventually led to an open conflict. Henry's desire for absolute control clashed with Eleanor's fierce independence and her own claims to power and authority over her beloved Aquitaine. His numerous affairs, particularly with Rosamund Clifford, publicly humiliated Eleanor. The ultimate act of defiance within their marriage came in 1173. Eleanor, feeling increasingly mortalized and disrespected by Henry, actively supported her sons, Henry the young king, Richard, and Jeff father. This was an unprecedented act for a queen to conspire against her own husband, the king, and back their children in open warfare. She personally rode across France, encouraging rebellion among the nobles. This was not a simple domestic dispute. It was a political earthquake. Eleanor defied her husband's authority, rallied support against him, and risked everything. When the rebellion ultimately failed, Henry II's retribution was swift and brutal. Eleanor was captured and imprisoned. For the next 16 years, she remained Henry's prisoner, moved from castle to castle, largely isolated, prevented from exercising her power or seeing her younger sons. Her imprisonment was Henry's ultimate act of control, but her continued defiance was her refusal to break. Even from captivity, she remained a powerful symbol, and her sons, especially Richard the Lionheart, continued to scheme against their father, often inspired by their mother's plight. Her will remained unbroken. It wasn't until Henry II's death in 1189 that Eleanor was finally released by her favorite son, Richard I, who ascended to the throne. At nearly 70 years old, Eleanor, having spent almost 2 decades in captivity, emerged with her spirit and political acumen undimmed. She immediately took control, acting as regent for Richard while he was on crusade, effectively ruling England with an iron fist. She secured his ransom when he was captured and defended his kingdom against his ambitious brother John. Eleanor of Aquitaine and Henry II's relationship was a power struggle wrapped in a marriage, a constant tension between love, ambition, and control. Their defiance wasn't just against societal norms, but against each other. Eleanor's defiance of a husband who sought to diminish her, and Henry's defiance of a wife who refused to be contained. Their story is a dramatic testament to the complexities of power, passion, and enduring will in a medieval world where even a queen of immense power could be imprisoned, yet still rise to shape the destiny of a kingdom. Number 2. Hoise and Avalard. In the bustling intellectual hub of 12th century Paris, a love story unfolded that defied the strictest moral and societal codes of the medieval age, becoming one of the most famous and tragic romances in history. This was the intense forbidden affair between Peter Abelard, a brilliant and Medic philosopher and theologian, and his gifted student Heloise, a young woman of extraordinary intellect and spirit. Their devotion challenged the sanctity of the church, the expectations of family, and ultimately led to a life of profound suffering. Yet their love endured through separation, mutilation, and monastic vows. Abelard was arguably the most famous scholar of his time, renowned throughout Europe for his sharp mind, eloquent lectures, and controversial theological positions. He attracted thousands of students to Paris, a superstar of philosophy. Heloise was a young woman of noble birth, living under the care of her uncle, Canon Fulbert of Notre Dame. She was exceptionally intelligent, fluent in Latin, Greek, and Hebrew, a rarity for any woman of her era, and highly educated. Abelard, captivated by Heloise's intellect and beauty, sought to become her tutor. Canon Fulbert, proud of his niece's abilities, agreed. Began as an academic mentorship, quickly transformed into a passionate secret love affair. Abard. Despite his clerical status, he was a canon at Notre Dame, not a priest, but still bound by vows of celibacy. Pursued Heloise with an intensity that later he himself condemned as reckless. He later admitted to being consumed by lust, but their letters reveal a deep intellectual and emotional connection that transcended mere physical attraction. Their defiance was immediate and profound. A scholar of Abalard's standing engaging in a sexual relationship, especially with his own student, was a grave scandal. Their love was an open secret that fueled whispers throughout Paris. Heloise became pregnant, and the need for secrecy intensified. She gave birth to a son whom they named Astrolabe. To protect Heloise's reputation and their son, and to mitigate the burgeoning scandal, Avalard proposed a secret marriage. This was another act of defiance. Marriage for a cleric, even a non-priestly one, was a highly controversial act, and could end his career. Heloise remarkably resisted the idea. She argued passionately that marriage would hinder Abalard's intellectual pursuits and destroy his career. She recognized the profound implications for him, demonstrating a selfless love that prioritized his genius over her own social standing or security. She argued that a scholar should be unencumbered by domestic responsibilities. Despite her eloquent protests, Abelard eventually persuaded her, and they married secretly. This was a desperate attempt to legitimize their relationship in the eyes of God, and to some extent society, even if it remained hidden. However, Canon Fulbert, enraged by the deception and perhaps feeling dishonored by the entire affair, eventually revealed the secret. Fulbert's retaliation was brutal and utterly barbaric. He hired men to break into Abelard's lodging and castrate him. This act meant to punish Abelard for his transgression and to symbolically remove him from the intellectual sphere was a horrifying and deeply personal violation. It ended Abelard's career as a public scholar and forced him to retreat into monastic life. Their defiance, however, did not end there. Following Abelard's mutilation, both he and Heloise embraced monastic lives, but their connection was not severed. Heloise became a nun at the convent of Argenteuil, and later became abbess of the Paraclete, a monastery founded by Abelard. Their subsequent correspondence, decades later, forms one of the most poignant and defiant collections of letters in history. In these letters, they grapple with their past, their love, their faith, and their intellectual bond. Heloise, even as a devout abbess, boldly asserted her continuing love for Abelard, questioning the monastic life and expressing her profound sorrow and longing. She challenged Abelard's spiritual pronouncements, debated theological points, and poured out her heart. Her letters were an extraordinary act of intellectual and emotional defiance, refusing to let the strictures of monastic life erase the depth of her feelings or her intellectual independence. She questioned the very nature of sin and redemption, still yearning for the love that had been so cruelly taken from her. Abelard, in turn, sought to guide her spiritually, but his responses often reveal his own lingering pain and a profound respect for her intellect. Their correspondence continued until Abelard's death, a defiant intellectual and emotional dialogue across the monastic divide, a testament to a love that no punishment, no separation, and no vow could truly extinguish. Heloise and Abelard's story is a powerful narrative of defiant love that challenged medieval society's rigid control over personal relationships, intellectual freedom, and clerical celibacy. Their bond, born of shared intellect and passion, was brutally punished, yet it survived through powerful letters that continue to resonate. Theirs was a love that refused to be silenced, echoing through time as a testament to the enduring power of human connection against all odds. Number 1. Ines de Castro and Peter I of Portugal. In the mid-14th century, in the small but strategically important kingdom of Portugal, a love story unfolded that was so passionate, so defiant of political necessity, and so tragically brutal that it became a legend etched in blood and tears. This is the tale of Ines de Castro, a noblewoman from Galicia, and Peter I, the Crown Prince of Portugal. Their unwavering love challenged a kingdom, defied a king, and led to assassination, civil unrest, and a macabre act of revenge that sent shivers down the spines of all who witnessed it. Ines de Castro arrived in Portugal as a lady-in-waiting to Constance of Castile, the bride of Prince Peter. Constance was the daughter of the King of Castile, and her marriage to Peter was a crucial political alliance for Portugal. Ines, though noble, was of a much lesser standing. She was described as exceptionally beautiful, graceful, and intelligent. From their first meeting, Peter was captivated by Ines. What began as an innocent friendship quickly blossomed into a deep, consuming love. This was the ultimate defiance. Peter was already married to Constance, a political necessity. To fall in love with his wife's lady-in-waiting was a direct affront to his father, King Afonso IV, to the Queen, and to the political stability of the kingdom. Peter and Ines made little attempt to hide their feelings. Their public displays of affection, their constant companionship, and Peter's clear preference for Ines over his legitimate wife became a scandal. Peter began living openly with Ines, treating her as his true consort, even after Constance bore him children. This was a clear sign of his defiant commitment to Ines. Disregarding the conventions of royal marriage and the expectations of his family, King Afonso IV was furious. He understood the immense political danger this illicit relationship posed. Constance was a Castilian princess. Offending her and her family could lead to war. Furthermore, Ines was a member of the powerful and ambitious House of Castro, which had significant influence in Castile. Afonso feared that Peter's devotion to Ines would lead him to priorities, Castilian interests through the Castros over the interests of Portugal. He repeatedly ordered Peter to separate from Ines, even exiling her from court. But Peter was as stubborn as he was passionate. He openly defied his father, refusing to abandon Ines and maintaining contact with her even when she was banished. Their love was further cemented by the children they had together. 4 children, 3 sons and a daughter, born out of wedlock but cherished by Peter. These children, though illegitimate, posed a perceived threat to the legitimate line of succession, particularly to Peter's only surviving son by Constance, the future king, Ferdinand I. The Castros, through Ines, were gaining alarming influence in the Portuguese court, fueling the fears of the king and his advisors. The ultimate act of defiance by Peter and Ines came when Constance died in 1345, likely from complications after childbirth. Many assumed Peter would now seek another politically advantageous marriage to secure his dynasty and the kingdom's alliances, but Peter refused. He chose to remain with Ines, solidifying his commitment to her, and further defying his father's will. He swore he would never marry another woman. King Afonso IV, increasingly desperate to break their bond and concerned for the future of his kingdom, made a fateful decision. In 1355, while Peter was away on a hunting trip, Afonso, swayed by his counselors who feared Ines's influence and the rising power of her family, sent 3 men to the monastery of Santa Clara a Vela in Coimbra, where Ines was residing with her children. There they brutally assassinated her in front of her children. This act was intended to sever the connection and restore order, but it had the opposite effect. Plunged Peter into a grief-stricken rage that transcended all reason. His love for Ines, even in death, became an unholy fire. He declared open rebellion against his father, launching a civil war that devastated the kingdom for 2 years. This was an unprecedented defiance of a king by his own son, fueled by love and vengeance. When King Afonso IV died in 1357, Peter finally ascended the throne. As Peter I, his first order of business was to hunt down Ines's assassins, who had fled to Castile. He pursued them relentlessly, and 2 were captured and brought back to Portugal. Peter exacted a horrific revenge, personally overseeing their executions with unimaginable cruelty. But Peter's most profound and shocking act of defiance against convention and death itself was yet to come. He claimed that he had secretly married Ines de Castro before her death, and thus she was his legitimate queen. In 1361, he had Ines's body exhumed from its grave. Her decomposed corpse, still bearing the marks of her murder, was dressed in royal robes and placed on the throne alongside him. In a macabre and chilling ceremony, the assembled nobles and courtiers were forced to kneel and kiss the hand of the deceased queen, acknowledging her as their rightful sovereign. Her body was then ceremoniously transported in a magnificent procession from Coimbra to Alcobaça Monastery, where a grand tomb-matching Peter's own awaited her. The journey, lasting days, was a solemn and defiant affirmation of her royal status. A public coronation in death, Ines de Castro and Peter I's story is a medieval Greek tragedy, a testament to a love so consuming that it defied familial loyalty, royal duty, political expediency, and even death. Their defiance shook a kingdom, sparked a civil war, and led to one of the most bizarre and poignant acts of posthumous love in history. Their enduring tale is a powerful reminder that love, in its most extreme and defiant forms, can leave an indelible mark on history, even when it leads to destruction.